Hey up and welcome to the Temple of Blair. This is a conversation with Tad Leger from the band Toxik. As one of the first through the door at the Roadrunner's US office in the late 80s, Toxik had two records with Roadrunner Records. First being World Circus in 1987, and the second being Think This in 1989. We take a whistle-stop tour of the band's tenure with Roadrunner Records, which ended in 1992 with the band's first split. These days, Tad keeps himself busy with art and graphic design in the horror film industry. You can check this out at toxiktad.com. I'll leave a link in the description. He's got all sorts on there, from package design to posters to clothes, you name it. Thanks again to Tad, and let's jump into it. 1, 2, fuck shit up. Especially at the time when Toxik was about, because that was when something latched and they sort of realized, thrash and death, this is a thing, a commercially viable thing. So I try and unpick that and try and understand it a little bit more so that my generation of metalheads can learn how to administrate metal.
Yeah, it's like for people my age, it's always interesting because, like, for me, it's like it's like a linear point. Like I started with Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Scorpions. Then I had bands like Motorhead, and then like metal hit, and you kind of like it all is. But like for people like you who like started like what's like to go from like your A point to where you are now, it's got to be a lot different because you've got access to different information, and just it's a different timeline. So it's interesting, for like old fuckers like me, like you're like, how did you get to here and there? And
yeah. If this is the thing, because my entry point was sort of simple. It was like Iron Maiden was my big one, and then I took a jump to Trivium. I was like very much in the world of like new wave British heavy metal and the conventional sort of metal route. And then it was like just right now I'm into metalcore and screams and all this sort of stuff. And I noticed the little candy bar logo in the corner, and I realized there's a thing going on. There's like and obviously it's a word I didn't learn when I was 15, which was brand, and it was like, there was something about it, and it was like by design in a way. So that's where the knowledge gap is for me. But yeah, boring shit. Okay. But
all right. Well, I won't hold Trivium love against you, but I'll pretend I didn't hear that.
That's cool. I want to open up with just like pluggables. And I remember speaking to Ryan, he said you were graphic designing and you were in the horror film or in the horror space. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that's so compelling to me.
Oh yeah, well I'm a massive like horror fan forever. Like back in the 80s, you had all these great mom and pop video stores, and you had access to movies like you'd never even heard of. So for me, like I rented this movie. It was called Gates of Hell here by Lucio Fulci, City of the Living Dead in Europe, and like it just blew my mind. I was like, I had no idea like you could make a movie that way that like didn't really make sense, but like atmosphere wise, it was like, it was like a new drug. It was, something just like so high octane and just like, it's like, fuck you. There's no narrative here. This shit it's only happening for the gore and to upset you, and I just thought that was like the greatest thing ever. And, I became more and more like I really, as a kid, I always would judge by like movie poster arts. I'd be like, okay, that looks dope. This must be a shit movie. That poster sucks. So, that was really my goal was to get into doing that. And I was lucky enough to, first I started out in like music. I worked for a company called Red Distribution, who actually like initially put out like a lot of early metal.
Yeah.
They put out they were kind of called Relativity. So they put out like some records from like Corrosion Conformity. And so I worked there for a while. And then, then 9/11 happened, and like so much stuff in New York just like shut down. They let go like 3/4 of the people there. And then I moved over more to doing stuff with a company called Grindhouse Releasing.
Okay.
Which is owned by a major Hollywood editor, Academy Award winner Bob Murawski. He got an Academy Award for The Hurt Locker.
Okay, yep.
And so he works with like Sam Raimi. He's done like all the Spider-Man movies, but Evil Dead movies. But he's a massive horror fan. So I ended up connecting with him actually through my love of this band called Blood Farmers. I don't know if you've ever heard.
I've not heard of Blood Farmers, no.
Like like if you're familiar with like the Doom scene now, like every Doom band is about like 70s horror. Like, oh, look, you know, we love the Blind Dead, this and that. But like Blood Farmers were doing this in like the early 90s. They were like way ahead of that curve. And someone released their demos. And so I wrote to the email saying, dude, I love the stuff. I'm all about 70s horror and Doom. This is great. And the guy wrote me back, and it turned out their guitar player, Dave, worked for a Grindhouse. And he saw some of the stuff I did, like, hey, man, we need a new design guy. So that got me into doing like packaging and, you know, for the Blu-rays, and also some actual like movie posters, which was like the greatest thrill ever to like go downtown in New York City and see like my poster for Cannibal Holocaust, like up in lights. It was just, you know, that was the dopest thing ever.
No, that's awesome, dude. I'm trying to, I used to watch a lot of 80s horror as a kid because they used to play it on Channel 4 on Thursdays and Friday nights after 10 o'clock, and I'd stay up as a kid. And I'm trying to get back into it because I love the aesthetic. I love that kind of, how do you call it? It's like 80s suburbia, what I'd call municipal waste sort of settings now, just waste of teenagers, heavy metal parking lot. It's all sort of gravitates around that kind of area for me. But one thing I did recently is I went through all the Halloween films, just end to end, all of them, and I loved it. There's something about
the Rob Zombie ones.
I actually avoided the Rob Zombie ones.
Good move. You know, like I used to run into Rob, like when I lived in New York City, like a lot of like collectors conventions. Super cool guy, like totally knows what time it is, you know, when it comes to horror. But man, his movies, holy shit, just the worst. Yeah. So bad.
I've not seen. I think I saw the first one once or twice, and I know the backstory was the studio wanted him to do it, otherwise they wouldn't let him do what must have been, I think Devil's Rejects was already a thing, wasn't it? Whatever project he wanted to do after Halloween, they wouldn't let him do it until he did Halloween. So I was like, right, whatever, okay, cool. But there's something special about watching Donald Pleasance get dragged out of retirement every few years to run around a set of Haddonfield saying he can't be stopped. I love it.
That guy knows how to choose some scenery.
Yeah. It's interesting, like the horror stuff, because I compare Roadrunner, at least Case Wessels' strategy at the time, I call it the Blumhouse model, which is because combat, as you'll know from Sony Red, like Relativity and Combat, their budgets and advances for artists would range from, say, your 5 up to 30, 40. There'd be a scalable investment, but with Roadrunner, it is very much low investment, high volume, see what sticks. Yeah. And that to me is like, yeah, it's the Blumhouse model. Obviously, Case Wessels came first, but yeah, there's some correlation there, I think, which I think is what he adapted. But I think it's cool as fuck what you do. Anyway, I dig it. It's in my world. But you also still play music, don't you? You're in, is it Lusatola? Is that the name of the?
Yeah, that's the current project I had about like 2002 or something. You know, I had over a couple of bands I was in. So like right after Toxik, I played in this thrash band called Black and Sky. Who were sort of like old school thrash, like Venom, like really early, like Metallica. And I ended up writing a lot of riffs for those songs. I was still playing drums there, but I wrote a lot of the material. And then I got to where I was like, well, I'm going to take a shot and see if I can actually like cut it, you know, as a guitar player. And so that's what I've done in the first Lusatola recording I actually did with Josh from Toxik. He did the vocals, he did a few guitar solos, and he produced. So like he really helped me out, you know, because I had never done that, you know, from a guitar point of view. Yeah. And that's really going well. And now I'm doing it with my friend Ian on drums, and he's also doing like the bass. And now we're adding like some really cool like Goblin style keyboards. You know, I'm trying to marry sort of like, you know, horror metal and like kind of like horror like soundtracks in sort of doom and metal. You know, so try and like, you know, sort of like a soundscape. You know, kind of like Black Sabbath did. You listen to Sabbath and like they're not so much riffs. They're like, you know, it's almost like a panorama that you can see. You know, when you listen to a song like Black Sabbath, it's like so evocative.
Yeah. And
that's, you know, that's kind of what I'm trying to do now.
It's interesting. I think the terminologies really get screwed up these days. I think doom metal and stoner metal tend to get lumped together these days. And that's where I hear a lot of like, when you talk about the 70s horror aesthetic, there's usually a sample, then it kicks into the riff, and then maybe it ends with a sample or something like that. But my idea of stoner metal is like New Orleans sludge. It all originates from there. That's my idea of stoner metal. So I could feasibly get really stoned to. But
right.
I think now like the wording is sort of like been bastardized over like a number of years. It's the same with like metalcore. Like Trivium used to be known as metalcore. I know, and you know what I mean. Like that's a box they got put in. But now metalcore is sort of tech metal, weird. It's like guitar driven, like virtuosity. So it's hard to put a pin on what style things are these days.
It is, because I mean, you know, like especially like late 80s, you start to have like so much blending. Like a band like Faith No More came out, you know, and they're adding like kind of like more poppy keyboards with metal. And at that point, and, you know, we've got to the point like, how much more can you hybrid shit, you know, like, and, you know, some of it is terrible, but some of it's really cool. But yeah, it's true. Like, you know, like I see a lot, you know, I'll watch reviews on newer Doom stuff, and like I don't really consider it Doom. To me, like Doom is more like rock, you know, and so much of the new stuff, like it sounds like metal, and like that doesn't make it bad, but I don't really consider that Doom.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, it would go down 1,000,001 rabbit holes, but I think it's part of the cyclical nature of it as well, isn't there? There's like what we identify as thrash metal, and then there's a thrash revival of the mid-noughties, and I think different tracks also reinvent themselves, and that's where we sort of have the disconnect. Like there's revival new wave of British heavy metal bands which are just regarded as like heavy metal, and it again, it just gets a bit messy. Anyway, let's talk about your old bosses.
Okay.
So I'm going to try not to tread too much on Meat's toes. I'm not going to try and because it's a great podcast anyway. So I should direct people to Ryan's. You're on the
Train Jack episode. I had a great time doing the interview with Ryan. Very cool guy. Yeah,
he's absolutely relentless in his schedule and getting stuff out. I have nothing but respect for him. So you're joining Toxik 87, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, I think it was 86. 86 is when I came in there, right? Or maybe early part of 87. Yeah, they put out a demo and with a different drummer. And at a point, like, you know, Toxik, when they started out, were kind of like, you know, like more of an 80s metal band, you know, like kind of like Rad and Motley Crue. And they kind of progressive got like thrashier. And then they got a point where like this drummer, he you know, he couldn't really do fast double bass. He just wasn't that kind of drummer. So that's when I came in.
Right.
And
okay.
And one of the funny stories of the earlier times is when there were two women from Roadrunner who like heard the demo and they liked the Toxik demo, but because being women, they also thought they were like, you know, good looking hunky guys, and that included this drummer, you know. But like when the record came around, that guy was out, and they were stuck with me. And but what can you do? Yeah.
The two women at I was going to ask who were you dealing with at Roadrunner, but those two women must have been Holly Lane.
Exactly, Holly Lane. I can't remember the other woman's name, but yeah, Holly was really the catalyst. She, you know, such an awesome person. And it's really sad she just passed away recently. You know, about like last 10 years, I'd like reconnect her online, and you know, just such a great person. And she went on to do great things, like at Mechanic Records, like getting Voivod onto like a major label. You know, she really knew her stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were really, you know, the catalyst behind it. But that kind of worked against us in a way, because by the time World Circus was recorded and time to release, she had left Roadrunner. And there was no one at Roadrunner who was really a Toxik fan.
Right. So because at that time it is a skeleton crew, because they opened the office in late 86. Yeah. And I think it opens with just Holly Lane and Steve Ricardo. And Steve doesn't last long either. I think he's there for about 10 months. And then you see the Doug Keoghs and the Monty Connors coming in.
Exactly. Yeah. We mostly dealt with like, you know, Doug and Monty.
Right. Okay. But no one was behind your corner in the same way that Holly was, which was, yeah.
Yeah. You know, like Monty sort of has taste like me. You know, he loved bands like Voivod and Artillery and, you know, heavier stuff. And at that time, like Toxic just seemed sort of lightweight. I think probably to him at that time, it just like it didn't have that same edge. It didn't have the heavy vocals. And that was something that was brought up to us repeatedly at Roadrunner, including Case. He was like, you really need a singer, like Testament or Metallica. We're like, well, we're our own thing. This is, this is it. And, that worked against us in terms of the people at the label, because they felt that was just like, Roadrunner was sort of like into heavier stuff at the time. And then you also had John Hawker, who ran Hawker Records. And he was
Bellow, yeah.
Bellow, I'm sorry. Right. Cool. And he was more of a hardcore guy. And, so like I got along with all these people, but they were just not really fans of the band. So we didn't get a whole lot of support initially.
What was the European experience like? Because I remember seeing some Dynamo footage and it was absolutely fucking bonkers. And Metal Mike and Andre, I can't pronounce his last name.
Andre Berhusen, I think is how you say it.
Oh, well done. Yes. I'm going to take that as a soundbite and just keep it playing in my head. Yeah, so they get some special thanks on the record, but they're like champions of certain bands. So was the European experience different?
Oh, completely. I think World Circus hadn't been, I don't think it happened more than like maybe 3 months. And then we got that offer from Andre to come over and play. And we were just blown away. There's like 30,000 people chanting Toxic. Whereas like, in New York, we could, we'd be lucky we'd get like 200 people to a show. So, especially like Holland, like the Dutch metal scene, those guys were just so on point. They didn't, what I really respected about them is like, especially like, say other parts of the world, they'll kind of like look to America and they'll say, okay, well, they like Metallica, so that must be the band to follow. But like in Holland, they follow like who they like, they follow their own thing, which is just amazing, And I have so much love for like the scene there and the people. Like besides touring there a couple times, I've been with Toxic and Blood Farmers. I've gone on vacation there, like 6 or 8 times because it's, the people are so cool. Legal weed, it's close thing to paradise that I've seen.
Yeah, man, it's a different world, and I think there's a few instances where this happens. Dog Eat Dog are the other big example of bands that weren't necessarily breaking over the United States, but for some reason were just really well received over in Europe.
Yep.
But I think the way the Roadrunner manage its territories is you have to prioritize the home territories, because flying you out to Europe every week or every few months for a tour might not have been too viable, which is a shame, really, because if you'd have been signed in Holland, maybe it would be a different story. You might have got the backing you needed.
Oh, for sure. And that was the thing, like when we got that offer, we asked Roadrunners like, hey, can we get some tour support? But like, no, don't think so. Take it out of your money. So like, we got to go to Europe a couple times, but because we had no support, we basically just like break even, Thanks, Roadrunner.
So when you're recording World Circus, they put you down in Morrisound. Now, yeah. I'm hoping for a drummer's perspective on this one, because I'm trying to unlock understand the potential of Morrisound at the time. So far, I've got Jim Morris, Tom Morris, and Scott Burns. They're 3 dudes that give a fuck about the sound. And when we come in with what was regarded as not serious music, it was fringe music and no one could take it very seriously. They went, nah, fuck that, they're paying us, so we're going to do the job right. Does that ring true? Is there a particular thing that fascinated you about Morrisound when you went in that was different from perhaps any other experiences you may have had?
Well, at the time, like a lot of bands were going to Pyramid Sound in Ithaca, New York, like Anthrax, Overkill, I think Testament went there too. And it was like a very specific sound to that. And we had heard some stuff from like, I'm not really a fan of the band like Crimson Glory, but I thought that album Transit had a great mix. Yeah. And we could kind of hear our sound sort of being filtered through that. And, we thought it was great. And plus, Florida was like, for metal, like I had been a friend of Chuck from Death since like 85.
Wow.
Very cool guy. So, he was there. He came out a couple times to hang out.
Oh, wow.
And we met all the guys from like Nasty Savage, who, one of my favorite bands at the time. So, and Morbid Angel also was recording there. So like, it was a real hotbed for metal.
Yeah.
And Scott Burns was, very tuned into the scene, man. Great guy, great. He was an engineer at the time, but he went on to be a great producer. And Jim Morris just like could not have been like more supportive and more like dialed in and understanding with like what we were. I'll give you a cool story though. He actually came up to New York for some pre-production to hear our stuff, and we got a pizza from this place like that we always used. And we always got like hot peppers on there, but like the actual like sliced hot peppers. And the guy who made the pizza that night just took. I don't know if you had the same thing. There's just those burning hot flakes.
Yes. Yeah.
He just like put that all over the pizza. And like Tom Morris had like an ulcer and he had to go to the hospital because the pizza was so fucking brutal. He felt so bad. We're like, dude, we're so sorry. So that's how we started off with it.
Tom was interesting. I had an email interview with him, and he's just so fucking humble. Not one of those three guys would ever like take the responsibility of saying, "Oh yeah, we knew what we were doing with death metal. We knew what we were doing with thrash metal." They were just a matter of, we were just in the room at the time. There was nothing special going on.
Consummate pros, so good, and great to work with, and dealing with like young kids like us who like we didn't have a fucking clue,
It must have been a breath of fresh air for them as well, dealing with high vocals instead of guttural vocals.
I think that's definitely something that Tom really liked. That the music, we tried to be the best musicians we could.
Yeah. It's again, it's so weirdly it's weirdly diverse, but weirdly also it's just so fucking fringe. And yeah, it's just a hard nut to crack when you just got three dudes who are just so fucking nice. So how did you end up getting Ed Repka for the design of the artwork? And were you on board with your designing background and interest?
Well, at the time, again, like I'm a big time horror fan, and actually like a cool thing of note, I don't know, maybe in England wasn't a big thing. In the 70s, there were these magazines called Creepy and Eerie, and they were like, not like, it was more a magazine than comics. So it was like a little bit more adult orientated. And like, I lived for that stuff as a kid. There was this artist, Bernie Wrightson, like Obituary ended up using some of his artwork. You've seen it on some other metal. And like, that was the guy, I really wanted him to do our cover. And I actually did manage to track him down, and he was just too big. He was like, I'm not doing any original art. It's like, you can come to my house and pick something out if you like, but we're like, oh, so that was a little disappointing. And then someone at Roadrunner showed us the cover that Ed Repka made for the Circle Jerks. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like the punk, and he's carving out like huge like Roman numerals. We're like, that's dope. And so we put ourselves in the hands of Ed Repka, and he just killed. Like, both album covers just like were amazing. I think they couldn't have been better.
Yeah,
it's great to work with him.
It's again just speaks to that aesthetic, that horror aesthetic I like, the fucking heavy metal parking lot, sort of weird, almost cartoony, but not quite cartoony. It's
a little cartoony,
yeah. It's I think he also did another Municipal Waste. I think he did Hazardous Mutation by Municipal Waste, and I fucking love that one.
But yeah, quick Ed Repka thing. So he did, he handed in the painting for, World Circus, went into the art department, and someone in the art department dropped a lit cigarette on that painting. So if you look on the left side, there's a black smudge. Like, it almost looks like it's kind of like part of the background, but it's literally a burn on the painting. And they were too fucking lazy to just take a little bit of green and fix it. That was the Roadrunner art department.
Oh, so this is just the left of the.
Bad enough to be so lax to drop a lit cigarette, but then say, we don't need to fix this. Fuck these guys, man. Toxic. They're going nowhere.
Fucking hell. Did Roadrunner ever get involved in the production of the album itself, other than just pointing you at Morrisound and saying, "Off you go, boys"?
Not that I remember. No, I remember, lots of complaints when they heard the album, but no, I don't think they really, there wasn't any back and forth that I was aware of between like Morrisound and Roadrunner.
Sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't. It's an interesting dynamic. I think it depends where they are with the artist at the time, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I know they made a couple of executive decisions that pissed bands off. I think Consuming Impulse by Pestilence, like the band had a totally different piece of artwork set, which I've seen, which like isn't like amazing, but I think it's kind of messed up. Like, especially like one of your early albums, like, no, we're not using that artwork that you like. Wait, this is your album cover. That's a bitter pill. But I like that cover. I like the cover of Consuming Impulse.
That's it's subtle as well because it's such a good piece of artwork. And now that you pointed it out, it's clear as a bell.
I mean, like, I just, accidents happen, but to not even, and it would have been such an easy fix, just a little piece of green, never see it again. But nope, they had other things to work on.
You could even imagine if he'd done it on the right hand side as well. They could have argued that maybe the guy's like the dude with the cigar in his mouth, maybe he dropped it in his suit or something. But bad luck, man. Fuck.
And like a lot of the people in Ed, like the guy on the cover of World Circus, and also like the dad on the cover of Think This, they look just like Ed Repka. That's what Ed Repka looks like.
Right.
Like his hair is like parted exactly like that.
Very clean cut.
Super cool guy. I've run into Ed at like a couple of like horror conventions and shows. Awesome. Super cool guy.
Yeah. No, like Hilltop Pizza. Is that the offending pizza place?
That was the place. We always went to Hilltop Pizza. They were dope. We loved it. I don't know who was on board and made that fucked up pie that put Tom in the hospital. Otherwise, they were awesome.
Hey man, they're the first thanks that they get across both albums. So they can't have done too much wrong if they get top billing.
That place. There were two Toxic fans who they were so into band. I don't know where exactly they were from, not that far away, but they actually they found Hilltop Pizza. They went there and then somehow found us. We're like, wow, that's cool, man. Those are real fans. You're tracking down our pizza.
That's awesome. So World Circus comes out. I presume you do. Yeah. How often are you on the road? And I'm guessing this is off your own back, not off Roadrunner's back.
Right. Everything was, just done ourselves. Like we played in New York City, and where we're about like an hour north of New York City. Mm-hmm. And it was cool because the area there, they were really proud that someone from Westchester County, we were actually had an album out that was at the mall, and we played this place, this theater called the Paramount, which was a really nice big theater, and we packed it. And the owners of this theater were just appalled that a band like us was playing there. This was an art house cinema, and man, they were not happy. But I think we made them a lot of money. I don't know. So yeah, we mostly just played locally in New York, and then then we got to do those awesome tours in Europe, which were just amazing. It was pretty. To play the Dynamo open air was terrifying. To come out on that stage, I had to pretend that those weren't people. It was just like some kind of landscape. Because man, that was fucking scary.
Yeah, I was flicking through because it was released as a DVD, wasn't it?
Yeah.
For the first reunion, 2007, 2008 or something like that. But some of the set, if not all of it, is on YouTube. So I was combing through that. And the Symptom of the Universe cover was dope. Fucking love that.
Oh, did you like that?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's fast without being too punky. You know what I mean? Because a lot of whenever you speed up Sabbath, it sometimes belongs in like a weird sort of sloppy punk aesthetic, usually on a punk cover album or something like that. But it's tight as fuck. And
thanks.
Yeah.
The covers that we did, and I mean, we did a couple, especially when we first toured for World Circus, crowds in Europe, they want a 90-minute set, and we didn't have 90 minutes worth of material. So we're okay, we're going to play some Kiss and some Judas Priest. And I listen back to those covers now, especially we used to do Exciter by Judas Priest. Mm-hmm. And we did it so fucking fast, man. I mean, you hear our singer struggle to keep up with the vocals because it's just the tempo was insane. And I remember Josh was why did we do that? Is that your fault? I was yeah, it's probably my fault. I'm the drummer, so tempo.
It's all
I'm good friends with Joe Cangliosi. He was the drummer for Whiplash.
Yeah.
And his outlook is the tempo is what I fucking say it is. Shut up.
It's Tad rules. No one else fucking rules.
Hey, you know, I'm the one counting off the song, so that's it.
I need to track down the Displease Records re-release because that has some of the demos and it has a couple of covers on it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's got a couple like, you know, like rare live stuff, and like all the unreleased stuff actually came from me. I still had tapes of some stuff, and before we recorded Think This, when Mike was still in the band, we made some demos, and fortunately I had a few of those left. So it's great that those got to survive. And Displeased and also Metal Mind did really nice re-releases of those. They didn't fix the cover on World Circus, but they sounded good.
At what point, though, does that just fall into legend and it needs to stay as it is?
It's true. I mean, you look at like, I don't know, you ever see the cover of like Terror Squad by Artillery?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like one of the worst pieces of art ever, but it's married to that, you know, music, and, you know, I'm cool with it.
Yeah. The follow-up by Inheritance as well is an interesting one. The one where the mirrors where it all goes round.
Yeah, you know, Monty Connor does these great posts, like, you know, like album covers and the concept and what happened. And he made a good point, though. Like, that was, like, Brian Harris was a great concept, but the artist, he didn't quite nail it. You know, it was good, but it could have been better. But I'll say, like, Artillery, like, those first 3 albums, to me, like, that is, like, as good as thrash metal gets. I think it's, like, better than anything Metallica did. I mean, like, especially Terror Squad. Listen to songs like At War with Science. Before the vocals even come in, there's more great riffs in that than like all of Metallica's catalog combined. You know, even like, obviously you could tell they were inspired by Metallica, but for me, I thought they were like way better.
I was speaking with Monty about Comaniac on By Inheritance, and the demo version of that is just a little bit, the guitars are a little bit chunkier, and you get a completely different energy from it as well. Yeah, but yeah, it's something about that European thrash vibe where sometimes it does do better than the Bay Area.
Well, you know, that was a case where Roadrunner really did get involved with the production. Monty Connor actually went to Denmark, you know, and when I first heard it, I was like, man, this mix is like too clean. It's like, you know, it's a lot tamer than Terror Squad, but like it's really grown on me over the years, and now I like it as much as those other ones.
It's the strength of the song as well, but I recommend, if anyone's like wanting to be a tourist in album art, they should just jump on Monty Connor's Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, he has just, you know, he should do a book. You know, he does such great reveals and stories.
Yeah. The thing I didn't know is if you're looking at, like, I don't really do Facebook. I think it's lame as fuck, but that's his big platform. So if you look at his profile, if you go into the top right into the 3 buttons and type in, find search profile, because it's so extensive is his catalog of art, which is, you know, pulled up information on. Then type in your favorite band, and there'll be like 6 posts on it. I'm saying that because scrolling down is too much effort. Because I was trying to find information on the Great Cat, and I had to go like down 3 years to get it, and then I found out, I could have just fucking searched it.
Well, you know, I played with Cat.
Oh, no fucking way! What era?
Like half of Beethoven on Speed is me on drums.
Fuck off! You are joking.
Nope.
Why half?
Okay, this is a pretty cool story. Like Monty called me up. He's like, "Hey, Cat needs a drummer. Are you interested?" And I was like, "That would be a very hard no." And hard no. And he's like, "Oh, well, you know, she'll pay." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Oh, never actually got paid for like playing music." I was like, "How much?" And we worked something out. I was like, "Okay, I'm in." And it was so uncomfortable because she had fired her first drummer halfway through that record. Mm-hmm. And when I got to, he was still there. And I was like, "Oh man," I was like, "This is awkward as fuck." And but he was like so psyched to get out of there. He was like, "Cool, no problem, man. Good luck."
I'm trying to figure out who the drummer was.
I know lots of people, you know, Kat she's a maniac, she's insane, but she was always super cool to me. And, you know, always, you know, because like, I'm not going to get, you know, dissed by Kat. I'm not going to stick around. But she was, you know, I have respect for her, you know, speed wise, you know, she had it big time. Yeah. And we're at the place in New York City where we go to practice, you know, we use like the biggest, most expensive room, and she'd run her rig through the PA And like in these speakers, there were like tubes that would glow like as a warning if you're playing too loud, and they were like on all the time. It was so fucking loud. Like other bands would come and it's like, what the fuck is going on? It was nuts, man. The studio hate us. They're like, just like, if you blow up this PA, man, you bought it.
So, dude, you're a Roadrunner 2-timer.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's crazy. I did a mini documentary on Cat, just like 40 minutes, no budget, just trying to string things together. Mm-hmm. And just going through the whole sort of, I'm going to call it the mythos, because not only is she the real fucking deal, right? She's dead serious.
Yeah, it's not an act.
It's absolutely not an act. But also, it looks like it was pushed in the right way in certain ways as well, because she ended up on TV. She ended up on, shit, what's the woman's name?
Oh, yeah, it was a Morton Downey show.
One, it was Morton Downey. There was another one. There was a talk show. It was a lady talk show. She had a little plastic. Joan Rivers. Christ, I can't believe.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know she did Joan Rivers.
Yeah, dude. I'll send a link after this. It's dope. It's fucking great. But yeah, the Morton Downey thing is so interesting because obviously Morton Downey is like he was a prick, and he was just a prick to his guests.
And it was so great.
Yeah, and she's just, you're just intimidated by the fact that I'm a woman and I'm empowered. And you hide behind your cigarettes. And she was completely fucking right, it turns out. So
I loved how she was like, Mort, suck my dick. And she's like, I bet you have one.
Oh my God. Go on back to about Catfish. But she's still fucking going, like, strong. Like, because I was tossing up between, like, does she have a day job and there's this, like, the persona? Is this, like, the weekend thing? And after a bit of digging, I was like, well, I say a bit of digging. It was Tom Von Doom, who was the bass player, who was just like, no, she does this, like, this is it. This has been it for the last nearly 40 fucking years.
Oh, yeah. Her family's, like, got some money. That's why, like, you know, they were able to, like, pay me to do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. How did your relationship with the cat end then? Or are you about to tell me that you've been drumming with her for the last 30 years?
No, she actually hit me up maybe like, I don't know, 8-10 years ago. I was like, you want to do another record? I was like, no. But things, I forget what changed for me that I didn't want to do it. But yeah, everything was amicable. And actually the guy who replaced me was my longtime friend, Jason Bittner, who's the drummer for Shadows Fall, now the drummer for Overkill. So he put in time in the Cat boot camp too. Wow. He's a tough guy. That's why he was able to survive that gig.
That's insane. I had no idea that you played with the Cat. That's fucking insanity.
Yeah, at the time, my name was intentionally left off of that record.
Yeah. Even on Discogs, it doesn't say anything. It just said Monty producer, John Mathias producer, Great Cat producer, and that's it. But hey, you got paid.
Yeah.
They got paid, so it's all good.
It definitely worked for my stamina, man. After playing with Cat, I could play pretty fucking fast in a long time.
So moving out of World Circus, and to think this, how did the label take to Mike leaving the band? Why did he leave the band? Or is that well recorded and boring?
No, I mean, with Mike was from like a pretty distant part of New Jersey from us. It was a really long drive. So at a point, I asked my parents, I was like, hey, can like Mike come and stay at the house for a minute? So he was living in my basement for a while, which is, not the greatest accommodations, but, we all got along really well. And I think at a point, things were not easy for us at all. Like Roadrunner was not too supportive. Things were definitely tough for the band. And I think Mike, I was like, I think I want to do, something different with my life. And we all personally, we love Mike, and as a singer too, personally, I'm not a huge fan of higher pitched vocals. I love Rob Halford and stuff, but I hate stuff like Queensryche, Fates Warning. I'm not a fan. But I also Mike's vocals were hard, but they were intense. Those were real screams. So I was behind that, and so and Roadrunner really did not like Mike. So they were like, okay, cool. You're going to get another vocalist. That's great. Get someone who sounds like Chuck Billy, and maybe we'll support you. And I was behind this to a degree, and I was kind of disappointed that the guy we chose was like a guy like I personally did not like at all. And, you know, it just, I know when his name came up, I was like, no, another hard no. And Josh basically had him sing the same way. You know, I was like, it's like we just traded, you know, we're in the same style, but like a guy who's like much less pleasant to be with. And, you know, and I was not happy. I mean, like in the studio, I think Charlie did pretty well, but he never held up live. And yeah, that was a bummer. That was really something that put like a big fracture in the band.
Right. Even if the label was happy, if things aren't happy on the home front, that's where it's going to start.
But they weren't, because they were hoping we were going to get a heavier vocalist, and we didn't. We just like went on.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So yeah, they were not happy at all.
Yeah. They're happy with the opportunity and the vacancy, where they weren't happy. Obviously, that you effectively, Josh effectively copy and pasted the dynamic.
Yeah.
Back into the band.
So,
crazy.
The Roadrunner was even less pleased with us at that point.
But they sent you to Morrisound for the second album.
Yeah, you know, which was great. You know, working with them, we had a great time.
Was there a lightning storm or something?
Yeah. And I actually saw it coming because, you know, my tracks were done and I was, you know, watching a movie in the lounge, and I see like this cloud about like the size of a car, and it's only about like 15 feet off the ground. I was like, what the hell is that? And it comes closer, and I see it like hit like the metal, like tracking outside the door, and all the lights went out, and all you could smell was like that burnt electronics. And we were like, oh man. I mean, that was like the most upset I ever saw Tom Morris. Like, he really thought that like shit was, you know, was devastated, but fortunately, like, it was just some superficial damage.
Right. Can we explore the possibility that Tom Morris is cursed when he crosses paths with you?
I think everyone was cursed to cross our paths with Toxik. We were like literally like, what's that song? Like Born Under a Bad Sign, man. Had shit luck all the time.
Fuck me.
But that's not really true, because we work with great people like Scott Burns and Tom Morris, and you know.
Yeah, Tom Morris just like his health insurance kicks in whenever whenever he speaks to you guys.
Cover that ulcer.
Yeah. So how did the label think this?
Didn't like it at all.
Fuck, it was just fucking beat after beat. Yeah. How I take it the relationship with Roadrunner ends through them not picking up the second option?
Oh, well, no, like after, you know, by the time we got in for World Circus, there were definitely like some tensions that were like not getting any better. I was actually kind of thankful, like after my drums were done, Chuck from Death, you know, came actually picked me up, and I stayed with him for the rest of the time, because the things were a little, you know, a little tense. Probably all my fault, you know. I'm an asshole. But and then we went to Europe a second time, and we had some great shows. But like when you're having some tensions in the band, going on tour is like the worst possible thing you could do. And you're in a submarine with these guys, and you just hate everyone so much, you know. And by the time we got back, we're like, okay, I don't think, you know, this is not going to continue.
Yeah, fair enough. It's still some presumably some good memories to share, or to keep even.
Big time.
That's why we're here, isn't it?
It was really, you know, especially like getting to go to Europe, and you know, I have lifelong friends there. Like there are people who worked, you know, in our sound crew or something, who are still friends of mine that I talk to all the time. So I had a lot of great, you know, experiences, and I'm really proud of the music. You know, I think we did what we personally wanted to do. And Lord knows, like, no one was saying, it's like, what you're doing is great. Keep doing that. Everyone was like, don't you want to make some money? You know, this is not going to sell. And so it was cool, because especially like Josh and I were big fans of like 70s prog. Like we love Yes and Jethro Tull and stuff like that. So we really wanted to bring that into thrash, which at that point had not really, you know, been done. You had bands like Watchtower that were doing some crazy tech stuff. But like, you know, it didn't have like, the thing I liked about it, especially like Josh, there's lots of guitar players who could do sweeps and fast arpeggios and stuff, but they can't write a song, or they can't write a riff that'll crack your skull. And Josh could do both of that. You know, the guy was just so insanely talented. Like, his lyrics were great, his concepts were awesome, but like most of all, he wrote like memorable songs. And I think that's kind of why Toxic still, you know, has some traction.
Definitely.
Because, you know, there's a lot of hooks in that stuff.
I was going to say, like, my recommended sort of track, if you want to just get a good vibe of where Toxic coming from, is World Circus. It's the title track, just because that riff is like, in any sort of thrash context, it's like, okay, we're going 4/4, we're a chugga chugga chugga, but no, we're going big lick over eight bars. It goes longer than it's meant to, but it still works and it still lands. And I think that demonstrates, like, all right, we're not dealing with a conventional thrash aesthetic here.
And that was like kind of what made Toxic great, is we were all into like different stuff. I guess like me and Josh were the most into metal. Like, you know, we like bands like Voivod and English Dogs, and just a little bit more, like, say, more fringe stuff, more underground. But the other guys, they were, you know, much more like, you know, about like Brian, amazing bass player, but like Iron Maiden was about as heavy as, you know, he went into there. Yeah. And you know, Mike had some great taste too. Like, but like we all, like me, Mike, and Josh were massive Kiss fans. So like we really bonded on that. But like everyone had, you know, something really different to bring to that band. And like when it came together, it was an awesome mix. But in the end, it was what undid us, because by the time we got to think this, you know, those guys were like not so into metal anymore. And, you know, we're kind of moving into more jazz and stuff like that, which people do. You know, you grow up, you change, and your tastes change. So like by that time, we were like, you know, we're not agreeing on anything. We can't agree on the time of day. And so.
Would you have done anything differently if you had the chance? Because it seems like you've landed in a lot of bad circumstance with the Toxic Run. Even though the Toxic Run is memorable and you churned out a lot of good metal, and the rest of the world benefited from it, it seemed like you got, I'm not going to say a bad deal. It just seems like with Holly not being there wasn't someone championing the corner, so the dialogue wasn't quite as fluid as it could have been. So it's difficult for me to ask you, like, would you do anything differently? Because it seemed like a lot of these circumstances were out of your control, and presumably a lot of people are Roadrunner, because if there's no one championing the corner, it's more of a toxic thing. The Toxic is a thing that happened to their day-to-day job, as opposed to what it would have been with Holly.
Right. Yeah. You know, it would have been great to know if she had stuck around, and like if that would have like got us, you know, to, you know, another level. But I think like at that time, you just didn't, like, you know, bands like Dream Theater and stuff like that had very much established, you know, a prog and heavy thrash, but that just didn't really exist at the time. So we didn't fit in with people who are fans of like Slayer and stuff. We weren't that brutal. But then we were too heavy for people who were like fans of Queensryche or, you know, Crimson Glory. Yeah. So like we were just kind of stuck. And I think, you know, we definitely, I mean, we worked hard, you know, we tried to make all the best decisions we could. Probably like the two things I do differently now, like I hated that ballad on Think This, There's the Defense, that there was like a really bad scene in the studio. I was like, I'm not doing a ballad, fuck this. And I hate that Led Zeppelin cover out on the tiles. Like, we did so many dope covers. We could have done Exciter, like He's a Woman, She's a Man. Like, I hate Led Zeppelin, man. Talk about like terrible vocals. Robert Plant, man. It's not a fan. You
know, I actually heard, it must have been like 10 years ago. I saw like a footage of Steven Tyler in a club doing a Whole Lot of Love. And it was like, fucking hell, Steven Tyler, he must have been 70 then, or at least like late 60s then. And it sounded better than Robert Plant was in his 20s. It's like, I don't hate Robert Plant as a singer. I think like a lot of his live stuff, his studio stuff feels like a fluke when you hear him live. But it was just interesting to see like a delivery that was so deliberately different from Steven Tyler like 10 years ago, especially for like a 65, 70-year-old man. But,
yeah, I mean, I'd never say like guys in Zeppelin are not talented. I mean, John Bonham's an amazing drummer, you know, and Plant Against, he's got a great voice, but all the moaning and groaning, I hate his style. I hate it.
It's just too loosey goosey. Is that what you think?
You know, I don't know. Take like Ozzy, not a guy who has a big range. You know, no one would technically consider him a great vocalist, but I'd rather hear that.
Yeah.
You know, it's just personally, I'm trying to think like anyone who's like in that style. Like I liked some of the early Queensryche. I hated everything after that. So I'm trying to think like who else. Well, or you take a guy like Ian Gillan. You know, like I like those vocals. You know, because there's some power behind, you know, the high vocals. That guy was a powerhouse, you know. So I wouldn't say like I'm totally opposed to that style. I just don't like, a lot of that genre.
Yeah, it felt. I feel like it's sort of like the Robert Plant's more flair than substance. I guess it could be where you're coming from, but yeah.
Again, it's all like, you know, it's where you're coming from personally. Like, you know, like I don't like positive stuff. I don't like happy stuff. So like, you know, Sabbath, you know, like Sabbath is music for like miserable stoner loners, you know, and like I fit into that category. That's me. I don't, you know, I wasn't hooking up with like chicks all the time. Like, or maybe I would like Robert Plant because, you know, I could relate to feeling that way, getting laid with hot chicks all the time. Maybe. You know, maybe I would like relate to that, but I don't.
Maybe, yeah. Well, that's
like,
all. That's all I've got for like questions about Roadrunner. But I just wanted to like give an opportunity if you've got any other stories or anything that I've completely missed or anything like that. Before I hit you with a dumb question, which I haven't asked anyone for a while.
Oh man, they're really there's some really good ones. When we toured with King Diamond. We had like some really, really good times. I tell you, like that guy, Andy LaRoque, and Snowy Shaw are like three of the nicest, most supportive, classy guys like ever. And sometimes, you know, we would end up at the same like truck stop when we're on the road. And most of the time, like if I saw that, I'd corner King Diamond. I'd ask him all these Merciful Fate questions, and he was like so nice and like, you know, like putting up with all of that. I think at a point, like he understood that I like Merciful Fate much better than the King Diamond stuff. But there was, and you know, those guys like they partied a little bit for the most part. You know, they were low key. And we were at this one truck stop, and this guy came over. I guess he was sort of like, you know, like a pimp, drug dealer, hustler. And he came up to one of the guys that came down. He was like, "Hey man, you guys need some coke? You need some weed?" They were like, "No, where are you?" He's like, "How about some girls? Want some girls?" We're like, "No, we're all right." And the guy like kind of was like, "What kind of band are you?"
King Diamond, bitch.
And then like one of the funniest is when we got yelled at by King Diamond. We were in the hotel somewhere, and I don't know, we're making noise in the hallway and like, you know, throwing each other into doors. And all of a sudden King opens the door and his eyes were like so bloodshot. You could tell we just got him out of bed. He was like, "Guys, you've got to keep it down. I need to fucking sleep." We're like, "Whoa, okay." Want another satanic curse on us? We already were cursed enough. But that was dope.
Yeah. Speaking of curses, I'll lay on a question I haven't asked anyone in a while. I seem to be forgetting it. Have you ever seen a ghost?
Have I ever seen a ghost? No, nothing that I would like, you know, attribute to anything supernatural. I wish I had, you know, I'd like to see it, you know.
Yeah, it seems fitting given your horror background to revitalize that question. I've had a range of responses ranging from just flat nose to Dave White from Heathen sending me a picture of the ghost that he captured. When he was in Hawaii, he like took a picture. I think his wife took a picture of a cat that was like begging for food, and then the picture comes through, and it's just like a translucent foot, and it's like it's not a trick of the camera. It's not like someone was walking past. It's unmistakably a foot just next to this cat, and it's really weird, and it's amazing.
You know, I've heard that like Hawaii is like one of the most haunted places on Earth. Because I think there are like a ton of like mass graves there, and you know they built these luxury hotels on top of them, and they have a lot of choking ghosts, like where you wake up and someone's like, you know, like choking your breath away.
Yeah. Fuck. Well, apparently once they sort of realize, oh, there's this thing on the picture, then obviously the restaurant staff are going, oh yeah, that's Brian the ghost. You know, he pops up out every now and then or whatever, but. Yeah, that's been the most insane one. I've had some Yeah, it's some good stories. I need to compile them all, I think, and put them into one big video.
Well, I think like ghosts are very much a British thing. You know, you think about like the Tower of London and Anne Boleyn. And...
Yeah, but dude, I live like literally next to Old York. I call it Old York when I'm speaking to New Yorkers. And that's like Roman town that got paved over by the Viking town, which got paved over by the industrial town. And then it's all sort of still there. And it's like you can't walk down the road without being offered a ghost tour. It's a really incredible city though.
Oh yeah, I'd love to go. You know, there's some bands from there that I really like. I'm a big Paradise Lost fan.
Oh, Halifax, that's my hometown.
Oh, sweet.
But dude, that was awesome. Thanks for sharing. I know it wasn't like, I know Roadrunner wasn't exactly amazing to you, but it is still like it's still an important sort of tract in the label's history, Thrasher's history, and all that good stuff. So it's worth going through the motions, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like despite all of that, you know, I mean, it was an honor to be on the same label as Merciful Fate and Snow White and, you know, Realm, so many, you know, great bands that Roadrunner helped, you know, get to the people. And it's probably hard to imagine for younger people now, like how underground that stuff was. You know, you had to like take the train 2 hours to the city to get to some record store and then maybe find, you know, what's there. It was like, you know, there was like a high bar to pass. If you were a fan of underground, like metal or hardcore, you know, it took some dedication. So like, I'm really proud that we were in that wave, you know, and that people really did, you know, kind of work their way to find our music. And all of like the new fans that have come around since the internet popped up, it's, you know, it's an honor to still be mentioned around bands like Dark Angel, who, you know, just like bands like Artillery and stuff like that, they defined my existence in high school. You know, it was just everything that I lived for. So it was a huge privilege to be part of that.
Awesome, dude. Right, dude.
All right.
I'm gonna let you go. Thanks so much.
Good. Awesome meeting you, man. That was really fun.
Yeah, all the best, Ted. Have a good one.
All right. Cheers, my friend.